Donald Trump is absolutely spiraling right now after suffering a humiliating defeat in Indiana, where the state Senate just rejected his aggressive push to gerrymander congressional maps in his favor. What makes this even more pathetic is that Trump just held an Oval Office press conference where he's now trying to pretend like Indiana redistricting was never really important to him anyway. He's claiming he barely paid attention to it, that it wasn't a priority. I'll fact-check that in a moment, but first you need to see just how weak and defeated Trump appeared when discussing this loss. Let's watch this footage in Indiana. Just a few moments ago, the Senate there rejected the congressional maps to redistrict in that state. A number of Republicans voted against that redistricting effort. You have spent a lot of time talking about this. The vice president traveled to Indiana. What's your reaction? Well, we won every other state. That's the only state. It's funny because I won Indiana all 3 times by a landslide, and I wasn't working on it very hard. Would have been nice. I think we would have picked up 2 seats if we did that. And you had one gentleman, the head of the Senate, I guess Bray, whatever his name is. Clears throat, heard he was against it and probably lose his next primary, whatever that is. I hope he does. But because he's done a tremendous disservice. I mean, think of it. It's a great place. I love the people there. They love me. We won in a landslide all 3 times. Got tremendous votes. I got record votes. And then there's no reason for doing that. And the Democrats do it to us. So I can't imagine that they do it, but I wasn't very much involved. But there's a band named Bray as I guess, head of the Senate. Was that Bray? Is that the name Bray? I mean, I'm sure that whenever his primary is, it's, I think, in 2 years, but I'm sure he'll go down. He'll go down. I'll certainly support anybody who wants to go against. All right. Now, let me bring the receipts because we always back up what we say with hard facts. And while you're here, make sure you're actually subscribed. Seriously, check right now because you might think you are, but aren't. So your subscription actually matters. Now, I've counted at least 5 or 6 separate social media posts where Trump directly threatened Indiana lawmakers, warning them of consequences if they refused to adopt his gerrymandered maps, and they rejected him. Anyway, let me read you what Trump actually posted. On November 18th, he wrote, "I'm working with Governor Mike Redraw and other Indiana Republicans on picking up 2 Republican congressional seats. The governor, a good man, must produce on this or he will be the only governor, Republican or Democrat, who didn't." Then he continues rambling after that. Trump posted, "I will strongly be endorsing against any state senator or House member from the great state of Indiana that votes against the Republican Party and our nation by not allowing for redistricting for congressional seats in the United States House of Representatives." Here's yet another post from that same date. "In the entire United States of America, Republican or Democrat, only Indiana Republican State Senator Rod Bray, a complete and total rhino, is opposed to redistricting for purposes of gaining additional seats in Congress." Or consider this one. "Very disappointed in Indiana State Senate Republicans led by Rhino Senators Rod Bray and Greg Good for not wanting to redistrict their state, allowing the United States Congress to perhaps gain 2 more Republican seats." Trump posted, "Congratulations to Indiana's tremendous Republican state representatives led by its great speaker Todd Hust and others." He then continues, "It was my honor to win Indiana 6 times. The Indiana Senate must now pass this map as is and get it to Governor Mike Braun's desk ASAP to deliver a gigantic victory for Republicans in the Hoosier state and across the country. I'm hearing that these 9 senators, some who are up for re-election and some in 2028, need encouragement to make the right decision." Notice what he's really saying there. That's a direct threat. And it wasn't just Trump himself applying pressure. The Heritage Foundation, which operates as essentially an extension of the Trump operation and drafted Project 2025, they jumped in too. Before the vote even happened, they publicly threatened that if the Indiana State Senate refused to adopt Trump's gerrymandered maps, then Indiana would be punished by having federal funding withheld. They said roads wouldn't get paved, bridges wouldn't get repaired, disaster relief would be denied. That was the actual threat coming from Heritage Foundation on Trump's behalf. Trump even dispatched J.D. Vance to Indiana to apply pressure in person. Donald Trump Jr. was making threatening posts targeting Indiana lawmakers. Trump went Allen with repeated threats and intimidation tactics. And you had these MAGA state senators who were completely on board with Trump's scheme, and they were absolutely losing it today. Take State Senator Garton. He's a hardcore MAGA supporter. Listen to what he said. Let's watch this clip. Some say these maps are political. Let me be clear. Snorts. You're damn right they are. Political policy is political. And ultimately, when the final vote came in, the map was decisively rejected by a margin of 31-9. Trump's gerrymandering scheme wasn't just defeated, it failed by a significant margin. It wasn't even remotely close. The MAGAR Republican faction within the Indiana Senate lost decisively, and the Republicans there demonstrated they were willing to stand up against Donald Trump's pressure. Now, here's where it gets even more concerning. You've got this MAGA Congressman Marlin Stzman, who's a strong MAGA Republican representing Indiana in Congress, right? And he's being interviewed by Jake Tapper, who asks him directly, "So, do you actually support withholding federal funding from your own state, refusing to pave roads and maintain infrastructure, all because your state refused to go along with Trump's gerrymandering scheme?" And this congressman essentially agrees with that position. Think about that for a moment. You're an elected Congress member whose job is to represent Indiana, and you're sitting there saying your own state should be financially punished and have critical funding stripped away simply because they wouldn't rig electoral maps for Donald Trump. This is the level of loyalty we're seeing here. Let's watch this clip. To me, this is a team vote. This is one of those where it's like, you know what? This is the Republican Party. We're sticking together. And you know, the Democrat Party, they're doing the same thing in their states. I think it's unfortunate overall that this is even part of the conversation that we're having to have, and that policy decisions are being made over the redistricting efforts. But there should be some sort of national standard, but there's not. And that's why I'm really disappointed. I think it was a terrible decision. So, do you think, as Heritage Action suggested should happen now, that all federal funding should be cut from Indiana? Do you think that you should not have money to pave the roads in Indiana? You shouldn't have money to fund the guard bases in Indiana, because that is what the administration was suggesting. Presumably you now support that we have a lot of projects that we've been working on in Indiana, and look, we know that, you know, just like in business, you work with people who work with you, and, you know, President Trump asked for this. Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, he put a ton of time making phone calls. There was pushing, pulling, you know, and some of the excuses, there was no good excuse that I heard other than this just breaks precedent, or the president was being a bully about it. This is politics. I mean, this is hardball, and we're playing softball. And so my belief is that, you know what, he's going to look at Indiana and say, look, we want to work together, but I need your help. And the state Senate failed to help today. And then the Indiana lieutenant governor completely melted down over this defeat as well. Watch this footage. Do you want them primer? Yeah, I think we need to start going down that path. Listen, I've been, talking to people all over Indiana for years. I've been in the political world. I've been a delegate myself since 2016 at the conventions, the grassroots. I know that world well. And for years, the Senate has been known as the place where conservative bills from the Indiana House go to die. And so this isn't the first time that we've seen a weak Senate. This isn't the first time that we've seen something like this happen, where conservatives are shaking their heads saying, what is happening to the Senate? Now it's just on national display. And so we welcome that. We welcome Donald Trump Jr. to come in, and we're going to find some really good America First candidates to run in this next primary season. That's the chaos that was unfolding. But I also want you to see that there were some genuinely principled state senators in Indiana who stood their ground. Indiana State Senator Greg Walker, for instance, spoke publicly about the massive wave of threats and intimidation he personally endured. So many of these state senators received actual death threats directly because of Trump's aggressive behavior leading up to this vote. That's the kind of pressure campaign Trump orchestrated, trying to force them into submission through fear. But these senators refused to break. Here's Indiana State Senator Greg Walker, and he became emotional when he explained his reasoning. He said, "How would I be able to look my daughter or granddaughter in the eyes if I backed down to Trump's threats and intimidation?" That statement reveals just how intense and serious Trump's threat campaign really was. Let's watch this clip. I held a small baby last night. I think she's about 5-6 months old now. Snorts. And her mother had her in her arms, and she was asleep, and she's gorgeous. The baby, and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "No, I want the baby." And I said, "Would you give her to me?" And I've held her before. And she said, "Yeah." Hold her. And I began to cry, snorts, as I thought about the future for that child where we accept that intimidation is normal. Our rules can't even address it appropriately. But I think you understand the analogy I drew, and I shall refuse the offer for the sake of that child and the future of the state. Snorts. And you're thinking, oh, it's easy. You already said you're not coming back. You can't be primer. Well, some little seed in the back of my head says, go ahead and file. Snorts. I think it'd be the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. But that's what my wife thought when I ran 20 years ago. This is the stupidest thing you've ever done, snorts, and you're going to destroy our family. Laughter. And I said, no, it'll be okay. Snorts. She went and talked to me for 2 weeks. She became one of my greatest supporters. Snorts. Because she said, there's no reason you should be out there. I can't understand it. The political path that you took does not explain how it is. You became a Senate senator or how I've held the seat for 20 years. So she says, I know you have a purpose, and snorts and clears throat, and I feel like today is that purpose. Snorts. I may be wrong. All I got to work with is what I can read in the plain English. And here's another Republican Indiana state senator who spoke out. Listen to what he said right before the vote took place. Let's watch this. First of all, let me just ask you plainly, how will you vote on redistricting? I've already came out last week that I am in fact a firm no. I've seen the maps. They were just released yesterday. And it just really further strengthens my opinion that this is really not the best way the state of Indiana needs to go. What was it that prompted you to sort of stand up, speak out? You've been very vocal about this against the president's push to redistrict. You know, I think sometimes we confuse campaign rhetoric with the speech you use while you're actually in office. And while you get a little bit looser leash, so to speak, during a campaign season, this, now is the time to govern. And when it seems quite clear that we're isolating a population by the loose use of a slur, at some point you have to speak out and make sure that that's known. Now, there were multiple other disasters that emerged from that train wreck of a press conference Trump held in the Oval Office. Trump made some revealing comments about Ukraine. Let's see what he said. It doesn't really affect the United States unless it got out of control. A thing like that, as you probably know, because you are a professional, a real professional, which is something I don't say about a lot of other people, but you are a great professional. Things like this end up in third world wars. And I told that the other day. I said, everybody keeps playing games like this. You'll end up in a third world war, and we don't want to see that happen. Trump also made the absurd claim that he presided over the greatest economy during his first term. He's insisting the economy was fantastic back then. We all remember that wonderful economy during his handling of the pandemic, right? How spectacular everything was when he completely botched the response. I'm obviously being sarcastic here. And now Trump has the audacity to claim that the economy right now, during this current term, is somehow the greatest in the entire history of the world. Watch this moment. We had the greatest economy in history in my first term. I think we're blowing it away right now. I think we're blowing it away. And again, prices were the highest they ever were. Inflation was the highest in 48 years, or I think ever. They say 48 years. The press says 48 years. I'll accept that. But I think it was the highest inflation we've ever had in Venezuela. Now that we've seized this tanker, is the campaign against Venezuela still just about drugs, or is it now also about oil? Well, it's about a lot of things, but one of the things it's about is the fact that they've allowed millions of people to come into our country from their prisons, from gangs, from drug dealers, and from mental institutions, probably proportionately more than anybody else. They came in from many countries. We're getting them out. We had 11,088 murderers come into our country. Many of them are from Venezuela. Then Trump faced a question that really exposed what his Venezuela campaign is actually about. The reporter asking was from the network that typically supports him, and they asked whether his aggressive actions against Venezuela are genuinely about drugs, or if this is now clearly about seizing their oil, given that his administration just seized an oil tanker, and his officials are openly discussing taking their oil resources. So what's the real motivation here? Let's watch this exchange. The question was, with Venezuela, Is the now that we've seized this tanker, is the campaign against Venezuela still just about drugs, or is it now also about oil? Trump responded, well, it's about a lot of things, but one of the things it's about is the fact that they've allowed millions of people to come into our country from their prisons, from gangs, from drug dealers, and from mental institutions, probably proportionately more than anybody else. They came in from many countries. We're getting them out. We had 11,188 murderers come into our country. Many of them are from Venezuela. And finally, you had Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent speaking at this event. They're discussing some artificial intelligence executive order. And Bessent is declaring that they're going to ensure America maintains competitive advantage over China. This is absolutely rich considering Trump just handed over advanced H-200 chips to China without getting anything in return. He literally gave away highly classified United States intellectual property that national security experts universally warned would create massive security threats. But sure, go ahead, Bessent. Tell us about protecting our competitive edge. Let's watch. Scott, please. Yes, sir. This is pass-fail. As you said, this is the biggest technological innovation in our country's history. We've seen the canals, we've seen the railroads, we've seen the utilities, we've seen the build-out of the internet and the fiber. And now it's AI. And it is pass-fail versus China. We have the lead. We've got to maintain it. And it is also going to be the single biggest source of economic growth. But everything else we do with our defense. There's no use in having a golden dome if China's AI can get around it. There's no use in spending all this money on defense, and the U.S. will remain the leader in this under President Trump's leadership. He is the accelerated the growth. There you have it. That's the complete picture of Trump's terrible week. His gerrymandering scheme collapsed. His press conference was a disaster filled with lies and contradictions, and his administration continues making reckless decisions that undermine American interests. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future coverage.